Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to AWS 2017 Invent Las Vegas. Today, we are proud to present Shay Verma with Druva. Please give him a warm welcome to start our morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. Special thank you to all of you for joining us, because I know you probably had a late last night, like a lot of people weren't able to make it. But so thank you for joining us. All right, so my name is Shay Verma. I'm here to talk about infrastructure data protection. I am from the company based out of Sunnyvale, California, Druva, and I'll give you a little bit more about what we do and how we help protect your data that resides in the enterprise. It really doesn't matter what kind of data it is, whether it is data residing on your smartphones, tablets, or your infrastructure, physical or virtual, or in fact, if you're running in the cloud, EC2 snapshots, for example, we help manage all of that type of data in the cloud, AWS. And so I'll go a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But I just wanted to get started with understanding what's actually happening in the enterprise today. If I was to ask one of you or anyone in the audience here in terms of what's actually happening in the enterprise today, you would say something like this. You currently have a lot of infrastructure that you have invested in that is used for protecting all your data, either from applications like SQL or Oracle, like those kinds of databases, or some sort of hypervisors like VMware, AHV, Nutanix, or something like that. And you say something like this, there you have some sort of a backup software which is associated with a backup server, and then finally you are leveraging tapes that you are using to offsite your data for long-term archival purposes. But one of the biggest problems with using tapes today is when you're trying to recover information, a lot of organizations are they are unable to recover your data and hence not able to recover that information. But then as the data protection strategies improved over time, there came dedupe appliances and of course replication of information. Now, dedupe appliances came and gave the promise of reducing your storage footprint, because ultimately, if you have infrastructure on-premises in your data center, then storage is adding up to your cost as your data grows. And we all know data is growing at a very phenomenal rate. Then came the cloud. Everyone today, from a data protection standpoint, all the solutions out there are talking about the cloud, because if they don't use the word cloud, they are not cool enough in terms of a solution. So they're promising to give you the benefits of a cloud, but there's a lot of cloud washing going on, because what they're actually doing is they're taking their on-premises software and they're putting it in the cloud. But there are issues as a result of that. You can't scale, it is not efficient. And so cloud washing comes from as a result of that, because they're taking their on-premises software and putting it in the cloud. It's not really a cloud-native solution that can leverage all the microservices offered by, say, someone like AWS to help protect your information. Now, if you look at this whole picture, a lot of things are going wrong in this scenario. One, there are many, many moving parts. If any one of these moving parts is to go wrong or not to work, then your backups or your data protection strategy goes right out the window. Your SLAs go right out the window. Second, if you lost your data and you can't protect it, how are you going to be compliant to all the regulations that your organization has set forth to be compliant to? How do you ensure that there are no data infractions as a result? And so this is a very multi-labor, multi-vendor approach, and it's very complex and expensive to manage. Because today in your data center, there's a hodgepodge of solutions with disparate solutions that don't really talk to one another. As a result, you have multiple copies of your data that you thought you were reducing as a result of all the deduplication appliances that you were getting. So at the end of the day, this is what we call the chain of pain. I took that previous picture away, and I'm going to show you there's a lot of hardware, there's a lot of software, there's a lot of tapes. It's very labor intensive, and of course you have to have courier services to ship it off-site. Now, a lot of organizations are failing to recover their information back, and they also have multiple copies. This is what we call the chain of pain today, because organizations have a lot of moving parts in terms of what they're using to back up their data in the cloud or anywhere they choose to do so. Now, this situation gets even worse. As I was highlighting earlier, you could have multiple remote offices. If you have multiple remote offices, then maintaining all that hardware, software, and you have people to manage that, that becomes very complicated, especially if you have remote offices around the world. We have organizations that we help protect their data. They have over 80 to 100 remote offices, and that becomes a very complicated situation or a very complicated process and expensive for them to manage. Then comes retention and compliance. If you are saying Germany, for example, and you have some sort of a data protection solution that takes your data offsite. How do you make sure you meet data retention needs? How do you make sure you actually meet data residency laws that will help to make sure that you are compliant? And then compliance is a big thing. Naturally, a lot of organizations are taking the data, offshoring it, putting on tapes, and offshoring it or offsiting it, but for compliance reasons. When you try to recover it, A, the data is gone, right? And B, how do you know that the data there is actually compliant to all the compliance sets of rules that you've set in your organization? So tape management becomes very hard. How many of you, as a quick show of hands, are still utilizing tapes? Many of you guys are still utilizing tapes. And I had a customer, naturally, they were using Excel files to manage their tapes. Tape number XYZ has this information, tape number XYZ has that information, and then when they recovered it and when they changed their jobs, it's a very complicated process. So compliance and retention is very, very tough. Finally, there is that whole thing of disaster. If you look around what's happening in the world, it's no longer a question of if, but it's a question of when a disaster will strike in the region you are or where your remote office could be. If you look at where I come from Sunnyvale, California, that's where we are based out of. It's really earthquake central, right? So it's no longer a question of if, but it's a question of when a disaster will strike. And the question is to you guys, are you prepared to face a disaster to make sure and still make sure that your data is always protected? Now you take all these complications, multiply it across all your remote sites, that becomes very, very complicated. And that's where we come in, Druva. Druva is an organization that helps to protect all your data, irrespective of where it resides. It could be Box, Office 365, cloud applications like Salesforce. I mentioned Salesforce, Office 365, G Suite, Box. That's one set of data. All your mobile devices, laptops, or on your infrastructure, whether it is physical or virtual. We will take all that data, put it in the cloud, without any hardware, without any software, without any media servers that a lot of our competitors have to offer. So it is a direct-to-cloud model, and it is offered as a service, which means there's only one neck to choke in case you ever run into an issue. No longer do you have that myriad of solutions, disparate solutions that don't talk to each other. Now you have only one service that you will utilize to protect your entire bandwidth, entire data set that resides in the enterprise, and it doesn't really matter where that data comes from. We'll be able to protect all of the data across all your repositories. And as I mentioned here a little bit, it's also a little bit about the cloud. Any data that you have, how many of you guys are already using AWS? How many of you are planning to use AWS? All right, this is the great audience. Everyone is using AWS. So I'm sure you're running some sort of instances in AWS. EC2, all your data that is being snapshots, how do you manage that? We have a solution that will help orchestrate all the snapshot, the life cycle of that data, ultimately full search capabilities and analytics on the data that we will maintain backup for you and provide you that information across all the regions of AWS and across all your accounts of AWS. And then finally, if there's ever a disaster that strikes, you will be able to boot up directly from the cloud within minutes based off of all the VMDKs or AMIs that we have that we convert for you and store for you. This way, if there's a disaster in your remote office location, you can bring up all the infrastructure back within a few minutes. We do all of this without any hardware, software, and really it saves organizations a lot of money because you no longer have to manage that complexity, you no longer have to provision for all that hardware, and so it becomes a very, very easy solution. Finally, you have the ability to recover that data, be it a whole snapshot or be it a file level, very quickly within the cloud, within seconds, within minutes, for you to start leveraging immediately. A few advantages I want to talk about is born in the cloud. I was referring to the fact that a lot of organizations are talking about the fact that they are in the cloud, but they are actually leveraging on-premises software and putting it in the cloud, and as a result, there's a lot of cloud washing going on. We are actually born in the cloud. That means we are leveraging all the microservices of AWS. When I refer to the cloud, I don't say I'm putting data in my particular cloud. We're taking all your data, securely storing it up in AWS. And we leverage all the microservices that AWS has to offer so that in the event of any scalability or if you're growing significantly, we can, within seconds, within immediately minutes, try to scale for you efficiently and very cost effectively. We leverage all the security and compliance certificates that come with AWS naturally, and at the end of the day, we will help unlock the value of your data that your organization has created for you by providing full, complete visibility and control of information and analytics of the data that you actually store in the cloud. Because it is all stored in one repository, now you have full visibility of it. If it's in tapes, it really doesn't matter. If it's, you can get rid of the tapes and put it in the cloud, and you will have full visibility of it. Couple of things I want to highlight when it comes to how we actually save you cost. We actually globally deduplicate all the data, which means, unlike a lot of the competition where they cannot deduplicate data from one box to the other box of a hardware or from one office to the other, since our data all resides in the cloud, we can deduplicate globally all your data so that we minimize your storage footprint to the very actual minimum. And you only pay Druva for data stored in the cloud post-global deduplication. You will not get any extra bills from AWS, for example, when you have to restore the data. There are no egress charges. We take care of all of that. You only pay for data stored. And then, of course, we do ever incremental backups. That also helps minimize the data that you have in your organization to a minimum. And then the way you pay Druva is not by paying for actual terabytes of data that you store. You buy credits. It's like your minutes that you have your cell phones. You buy a certain amount of credits with Druva, and say, for example, you buy credits enough for 50 terabytes, but you only use 5 terabytes. Guess what? The CapEx now changes to OpEx, and now you only have to expense 5 terabytes worth of data consumed with Druva, and the remainder of the credits rolls over, and you will always have that available to you when you grow. Finally, we are able to reduce your cost by over 60%. A lot of people have asked us how we do that. These are actual hard cost savings. There is no infrastructure with us. It's a direct-to-cloud model. We globally deduplicate all your data. We minimize your storage costs in AWS, and then you pay as you go. You never have to provision for hardware today that you think you will need 3 years from now, because it is pay as you go with Druva. You only pay with data for the data stored at the time of utilization. A little bit more about security. We securely protect your data by putting all your data in the cloud. It is TLS 1.2 in flight, AES 256, and then we also leverage envelope encryption. Envelope encryption is a mechanism where your keys are safeguarded. We don't have any key servers to manage. So when we talk about envelope encryption, we take your keys, we encrypt it, and we tokenize that. That token is now stored by Druva. So we will never have access to your keys. We have access to those tokens. Those tokens, then at the time of going live of your session, gets available to the customer. Customer provides their credentials, and the keys become available and goes live in session where your data now gets unencrypted. So if the NSA or government was supposed to come back to Druva and say, hey, from Mr. XYZ, you store your data, give us the data, we have no access to the customer data. And then finally, the way we store data in the cloud by separating metadata from the data provides an extra layer of obfuscation, because now if anyone does magically hack into AWS, which will not happen, which has not happened, they will not be able to make anything of your data because the metadata has now been separated from the data itself. We support all the applications that are very moderately found today in the enterprise, whether it is SQL, Oracle, any of your hypervisors, VMware, Nutanix CHV, Hyper-V, and then we also support NAS. Now, something around NAS, we really help to protect the data in NAS file servers, for example, but the way we do it, we use machine learning and heuristics to determine what files are likely to change. If you see what's happening in the organization, large NASs are storing a lot of data, and every time you back that up, you have to scan that to see what files have changed, right? But there's a lot of files out there that have not changed, ACLs, permission files, all that. So we use machine learning to determine what types of file in your organization are likely to change, and we will incrementally back that up to the cloud very quickly. What I show over here is a typical NAS of about 14 hours. It usually took our customer they had one NAS, 14 hours to scan it to determine what was changed, to incrementally back it up. With our machine learning and heuristic solution, Smart Scan technology, we were able to reduce that to 1 hour. Now imagine your NASs scale in an organization where you have multiple NASs in an organization, and we are able to very smartly reduce the time it takes. VMC, anyone using VMC here? Not yet. Okay, so VMC is VMware in the cloud, and now your workloads can be on premises or in the cloud. Question is, with your workloads moving up and down, how are you going to protect the data? Druva is one of the only SaaS certified partners of VMware. Note, I'm saying SaaS because we are as a service. There is no as a service data protection solution. We are the only one because it's a direct-to-cloud solution, and we are the only SaaS certified solution with VMware to protect your workloads, whether it's in VMC or whether it's on premises as well. Finally, I was talking about data disaster recovery. The way we are able to provide disaster recovery services to you is at the time of a backup, we'll take your virtualized machines, VMDKs for example, convert that into AMIs. That's Amazon Machine Images. And if your workloads or your servers, or if there's a disaster to strike goes down, your remote office goes down, now you can take those AMIs, which is stored in your account, and boot up directly from there, which is in your account, and in that fashion, within a few minutes, you'll be able to recover immediately. A quick highlight overview of our architecture. I was talking to you a little bit about this. It doesn't matter where the data is. You have an optional piece of hardware, which is the Phoenix Cloud Cache, which helps you in quick RTOs. Again, this is optional. This is where we will give you a piece of software where you put on your hardware for very, very low RTOs. For those organizations that don't have an hour-long RTO or something of that sort, then you don't need that optional cloud cache, and you can back up directly to the cloud. And once it's in the cloud, which is Druva, right up box over here, we will separate the data from the metadata and store it in S3. This way it provides an extra layer of obfuscation security for any customer who is really worried about security. And then we auto-tier your data leveraging AWS Glacier. Leveraging AWS Glacier means it's lower cost storage for long-term archival purposes. We naturally transfer those costs over to you. Then at the time of a disaster, we will take all the data, your VMDKs, convert them into AMIs, store it in your VPC, which is a natural extension of your data center, and at the time of a disaster, you can now boot up EC2 instances directly from the cloud. That's a very high-level overview of our architecture that we have. That's all I have for today, and I'm also above my limit. We have, before we leave, I want to leave you with a few points. One, we'll provide a single pane of glass to manage all your data. It doesn't matter where your data resides. Full data visibility, you no longer need tapes and archiving offsite, and we will be able to reduce your cost by 60% because we have no hardware and complexity as a result of that. We have a lot of product experts over here at our booth, so if you have any questions, I can either address them right now, right here, or you visit us at our booth. What's our booth number? 1740? Our booth number is 1740, so feel free to stop by, and we'll be able to address your questions at that point. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.